This is Jordan Edwards, and this is the Business Jiu-Jitsu Podcast.
Good afternoon. I'm here with Ben Kovacs. Ben is a very interesting guy, entrepreneur, been in the corporate world. I believe you work for Twitter. You've had some great startup experiences. I think you may have sold some businesses. You're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And one thing I'm really excited to talk to you about is your project, the Guardian Project, which is a nonprofit for kids to bring Jiu-Jitsu to the world. But before we get into all that, give us a little 411. Who are you, Ben?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jordan. Yeah, it's a good question. I think like many of us, we thought when we were kids, we saw our parents and our grandparents, and we thought, you turn 30, you turn 40, you turn 50, you got it all figured out, and you start to realize, wow, like, especially in this kind of changing world where people don't stay in the same career for 30 years. You're like, who am I? 2 years ago, 5 years ago, I was working at Twitter, a couple years ago, working at a cannabis startup. I've had Guardian throughout. I've got some new entrepreneurial endeavors now. Now I'm a father. So I feel like my life is kind of constantly evolving, and not to sound sort of evasive or even douchey, but I'm kind of figuring out, what I want the next 40 years of my life to be like right now.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's douchey at all. I think that's what we're all trying to do, especially all people who practice jiu-jitsu and are on this great path. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in York, Pennsylvania, right in between Harrisburg and Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up there my whole life. Went to Penn State University. When I was 22, I moved down to the Washington, D.C. area after college. And so I spent the first 30 years roughly of my life right in that sort of corridor between middle of Pennsylvania and D.C. And then right around my 30th birthday, a few days before I turned 30, I moved out to California. So been here for 10 years.
Nice. What was the draw to California?
One of my best friends from college moved out here, my best friend actually, and I used to come visit him. I really liked it. I thought it was a cool vibe. Not necessarily anything to do with work and startups and everything. I really was attracted to the weather and the lifestyle and some of the things going on here. And I really planned it as sort of like a 1 or 2 year experiment. I was like, you know what? I was married earlier in my late 20s. We got divorced amicably, and I decided, if I didn't do this now, when was I really ever going to do it? If I had kids or got remarried, something like that, maybe that window would have closed. So I thought, let me go out there. I'll move there for a year or two. At least I don't have that experience. I can check it off the box and say I did it. I lived on the West Coast type thing, and I just never went home.
Nice. So did you go to San Francisco? Is that the tech connection?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I moved to the Oakland Hills, actually, right outside San Francisco, about a 20-minute drive into the city. And so, I set up there, ended up buying a house there and kind of lived there for the first 4 years or so, 5 years that I lived in the area. And then when I got married to my second wife, she lived on the other side of the peninsula. And so I ended up moving over, and now we live in Menlo Park.
Is she a California native?
She is, yeah. She actually grew up in Menlo Park. Her dad lived in Colorado. She went to school there, and then she returned home. She was from Menlo Park before it was, Facebook Menlo Park and Google Menlo Park, and so she's seen quite a change there. But yeah, now we live here. My stepson's dad lives here, so we're kind of, I hate to say the word stuck, but we're a little bit stuck here. We just bought a house down in near Pebble Beach in Pacific Grove, California, so we're gonna be spending more time at the beach, hopefully, and making that our home for the future.
Nice. And how old is your the kid you mentioned?
Yeah, I have a 9-year-old stepson, Kogan, and he'll turn 10 in September. And then we have a 5-year-old son, Bo, who's our son from our marriage.
I hope that you have them both in jiu-jitsu.
Unfortunately, the older one, I don't necessarily get to pick his sports, being the stepdad. Yeah. So his dad is very into baseball, very into football, a couple sports. So he's really focused on those. We belong to a pool out here, a club kind of thing, tennis and swim club. And I sort of almost bullied them, I guess I hate to use that word, but really pushed them very hard to starting a jiu-jitsu program, and finally got the okay on that yesterday. So he will be starting a jiu-jitsu program at the swim club in about 2 weeks. So I'm extremely excited about that, because as you might know, it's hard once you have a couple kids and you have to kind of run them around town. So getting it all in one place is kind of the way to go. And I don't think your 5-year-old needs necessarily like world-class jiu-jitsu instruction. They just need to be on the mat. They need to start moving their body. They need to get comfortable with it. And we can take them to the Danaher death squad or wherever he needs to go later in life.
Yeah. I have a about to be 4-year-old in about a month, and I have a 15-month-old. When I started training to Jiu-Jitsu in 2009, I was 24. I'm 37 today. And my sensei, he had a new kid around that time, Nuri. And he would tell us about his experience with parenting. And he said, you know, you're going to be driving down the street. You're going to have your hand on the steering wheel, and you're going to start to bob your head. And then you're going to look in the mirror, and you're going to look back at your kid, and you're going to see that they're bobbing their head just like you. Everything that you do in life, be prepared that they're going to mirror you, and and then they're watching, even young, they're watching what you're doing. They're listening to what you're doing. And I was, just in my early 20s at that time. It was in my mind, but I couldn't connect to it. And I heard him say it over the years. And then I had a 2.5, 3-year-old, and I'm driving in the car and I'm bobbing my head. And all of a sudden I look back and I'm like, I can't believe that this is happening to me now. Like, this is, just like jiu-jitsu teaching me all these valuable lessons. So that was my first one. Does that ring a bell for you? Have you ever had that experience?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure like you feel the same way. We want our kids to be better than us, right? Because we don't see ourselves as, that awesome and that perfect, right? So I'm always trying to be careful now, like, being a little bit better than, being a little bit better than I am in front of the kid to hopefully give them the right things to look at.
Oh yeah. And then he told me this other one. He goes, that 2-year-old, you're going to be feeding them. They're going to pick up that spaghetti. They're going to look you square in the eyes. They're going to take that spaghetti. They're going to look at that spaghetti, and they're going to throw that spaghetti right on the floor. You have two options. You could scold the kid. You could lose your patience. You could lose your temper, or you could just pick up that spaghetti and clean it up and look them right back in the eye and win that battle. And, had I not had that coaching from my sensei, I don't think I probably would have lost it, but just now, 13 years of jiu-jitsu training really, really helped me to be, I think, a better parent. So much calmer, never lose my temper. And now it's just jiu-jitsu to me. Like, I just look at the situation and I can laugh it off. And sometimes I have to tap. Sometimes I win. Sometimes I lose. But I'm always interested when I hear, I get another parent on the podcast to talk about them with their relationship between parenting and jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and I think jiu-jitsu, obviously it has a number of benefits, as I'm sure we'll get into, but I think with parenting, one thing that's interesting is that a lot of dads who have kids, they stop playing either in high school or college, right? Unless, you made it to the professional leagues. So I think that they're looking for their kids a lot of times to replace their dreams of kind of their failed baseball career or their early ending basketball career or whatever it was. And I think that the interesting thing about jiu-jitsu is we're still practicing, we're still rolling with high level people multiple times per week. We still have our sport, if you will, that we're actively participating in. So I think that we're not, at least I'm not anyway, looking for my kid to be my sort of like sports savior. I'm like, hey, I got my own thing. If you want to join, that's cool. If you want to do something different, that's cool. But like, I'm not going to be at, 75 baseball games every month trying to make you, the next Mickey Mantle. So, I think that's actually relieved some pressure from the kid, because I knew I grew up, my dad was really focused on sports, and I think he really wanted me to be good at sports and everything. And I have like almost the opposite problem where I'm just like uninvolved in my kids' sports to a certain extent, like not throwing the ball with them very much, not pushing them to play, just kind of too laissez-faire about it almost because I'm focused on my own jiu-jitsu.
I hope my mom heard that. My mom's always on me about go outside and have a catch with him. I'm like, I'm going to show him jiu-jitsu and I'm going to put him in jiu-jitsu. Like, I'm just not a catch kind of guy. I'm out here doing jiu-jitsu every day. So that's funny that you brought that up. I'm right there with you on that. So you brought up sports. Did you grow up playing sports?
Yeah, really, really heavily. Everything: baseball, basketball, football, tennis, soccer, swimming. I mean, I did it all.
You were kind of in a hotbed of wrestling over there in Pennsylvania, down in that corridor. Never picked it up?
I know. I grew up in a town where they had one of the best wrestling programs in the state of Pennsylvania. Wow. And I thought wrestling was so dumb. Wearing those singlets was so weird. And, probably a bunch of other words where I'd offend people if I said it. Now, of course, looking back after getting into jiu-jitsu, I started, by the way, when I was 24, the exact same age as you. And, now, of course, I'm like, oh my God, I could have been an amazing wrestler, but I didn't wrestle at all. And to this day, my wrestling is absolutely horrendous. I was rolling actually the other day at the gym with a guy named Mason Fowler, who you might know.
Sure.
And Mason said, "Hey Ben, don't even try to wrestle anymore. It's just like embarrassing, and one of us is going to get hurt. Just pull guard and just stop. This is terrible." So yeah, it makes me wish I would have done it when I was younger now.
That's really funny. Yeah, Mason puts up a lot of great content. He's all over social media and great competitor. Love watching him rise up. Young guy, right? I mean, he's only in his early 20s now.
He's 26 or 27.
Yeah.
Amazing athlete. Unbelievably explosive, very dedicated, always there, always training. I mean, it's really like training with professional athletes when you're training in that class with those guys, right? They take it very seriously. And I have to remind myself, it's not the 6 p.m. joke time where you play around with your buddies.
Yeah. I also have the opportunity to train with some very high level people, and it's a very humbling experience to play with them. And then all of a sudden they have that many extra gears outside of what I'm capable of doing. And you think that, we're having a nice competitive match, but they just can show you with that aggression and ferocity that no, actually you are just where you are and I am on a whole nother plane than you. So listen, so you in Pennsylvania, I'm trying to get the timeline right here. You move out around 30, but you start in 24. So you started your jiu-jitsu journey back home.
Yeah, I started in the DC area, Rockville, Maryland, at the Yamasaki Academy, which was the first, or at least one of the first couple schools in the DC area, Mario and Fernando Yamasaki school. Mm-hmm. I got into it. I was playing basketball, pick up basketball after college, and I don't know, the game started to kind of get wonky, where one day you'd show up and there'd be 50 people there. The next day there'd be 3 people there. And I was like, I really need some sort of more consistent exercise and focus. And my buddy was doing Thai boxing there, so he convinced me to go. I went there to try the Thai boxing class. There was a cute girl working at the front desk, and she said she did jiu-jitsu. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I think I can do it. And I always liked wrestling around with my buddies and just playing around for fun. And I was like immediately hooked. I just literally cold turkey stopped playing basketball, stopped doing other stuff. Jiu-jitsu, I instantly fell in love with it and knew it was special from day one.
Yeah, it has a really special quality in that way. So I guess that for you was around 2005, if I'm getting 2006, somewhere in that ballpark.
Exactly.
Any influence from like the UFC? Because The Ultimate Fighter came out in 2005. That was where I understood what jiu-jitsu was. Before that, I didn't know the difference between jiu-jitsu and capoeira and anything else. And just like you lived in a wrestling hotbed, I was living in a jiu-jitsu hotbed. In my town, there was a Ralph Gracie Academy. I lived on the doorstep of Ralph Gracie and Matt Serra and all these guys, and I didn't even know that it was there,
Yeah. No, not for me. I didn't care about the UFC. Heard about it, obviously. Remembered it kind of from more the cockfighting days when you had the 110-pound guy fighting the 300-pound guy, getting head stomped, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't get into it. When I started at Yamasaki Academy, there was a few guys there who were extremely friendly and welcoming. And then they started inviting me pretty soon after starting to, hey, come watch the UFC fights with us. And then I got into it, of course, after that because of jiu-jitsu like everybody else. But no, I wasn't watching the UFC, didn't want to be a fighter, any of that stuff. I just kind of stumbled upon jiu-jitsu accidentally and fell in love.
Yeah. When you moved out to California, did you jump into it right away?
I did, yeah. And that's actually, I think a great point is, instead of going to the bar or, collecting other bad habits or whatever, I immediately found a home at the Ralph Gracie school out here in Berkeley, which was about 10 minutes from my house. And then when I started working at Twitter, I started training at Ralph Gracie San Francisco under Kurt Osiander a lot. And I kind of went back and forth, whether I was at home that day or whether I was working in the city, training at one of those 2 schools. And then about 4 years after I was there, something like that, 3 years, I decided I wanted to start Guardian. And I talked to the owner of Ralph Gracie Berkeley, who's a good friend of mine, Dave Clayhan, one of Ralph's first black belts, about that. Dave's a really savvy business guy, very successful real estate guy. And, he's also a very scary guy, a very imposing, big figure, a guy who doesn't talk a lot, but when he talks, people listen. Yeah. And I didn't realize how well he would actually receive it. And he said, wow, this is great. I've always wanted to do something like this. Actually, he was very supportive. He actually convinced me to hire one of his black belts there at the academy to be my first instructor there. And it was a really positive experience. And that was, I think, one of the main reasons we were able to start Guardian was because of the support of Dave and the Ralph Gracie community.
Oh, wow. I'm excited to talk about that and get to that in a minute or two. Talk to me about landing in the in the Ralph Gracie ecosystem. I mean, it's of course, Ralph and Renzo being brothers, and they have a reputation, and Ralph always has this, real tough chip on his shoulder. Same thing with Kurt by, their accomplishments and also reputation. It's the style. It's a hard style of jiu-jitsu, like a self-defense style, a martial style of jiu-jitsu. Like, what's it like landing there from Pennsylvania and jumping right into that room?
Well, I think because I started in the Berkeley Academy is still very tough, but definitely more, I would say, family oriented and a little bit more chill, at least back in the day, whereas San Francisco had more Ralph influence, more Kurt influence. It was a little bit more of like the killers coming from different places that were training, full-time or semi-full-time competition type folks. So that, I think that eased me into it a little bit, which was good. I don't think I ever fit in with that style, to be honest. I was never a big competitor. I was never, focused on training 3 times a day and drinking protein shakes in between to recover or anything like that. So I always, I think pretty early on, I got the reputation of like being kind of a guy who liked to joke around, the guy who was there for fun. I was always trying to use humor to sort of like de-escalate things, let people know I wasn't there to, win a world championship. I was there to have fun and obviously get better. But, I never took jiu-jitsu that seriously like some people did, which I think was good and bad. I mean, it's good, I think, in some way that's kept me from getting hurt and allowed me to stay on the mat and all those things, from not overtraining. But obviously, I sometimes think like, man, I wonder if I could have been better at jiu-jitsu if I would have really, really trained harder and focused even more. So it was fine. And Ralph wasn't super involved in the Berkeley Academy, for those years when I was there. He was more focused on San Francisco and sort of his expansion. But yeah, I mean, definitely some imposing figures there, right? Definitely some scary guys. I remember one time I was training in the city and I snuck out from Twitter to go for lunch. And I was on the mats and I got armbarred by one of those, up-and-coming little savant kids who was 20 years old or whatever. And I think I was a brown belt. Maybe I was a purple belt. Maybe it was a brown belt at the time. I don't remember. I think it was a purple belt. And so I get armbarred and I tap, and Ralph comes over to me and he goes, and I barely knew Ralph at this point. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Why are you tapping to that?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Why?" I mean, I got armbarred and I got to go back to work in 5 minutes. And the whole gym got quiet because I kind of just like, I wasn't really thinking, oh, this is Ralph, maybe I should be more respectful. I just was like, I'm going back to work in 5 minutes, man. And the whole gym got quiet. And then I just saw his brain just started turning, right? And he didn't say anything for like 3 seconds while he was processing. And then I said, oh, fuck, like I may have really messed up with that comment. And then he goes, okay, let me show you how to do it better next time. And I was like, that could have went the opposite way. So yeah, he is an intense man, that's for sure. A nice guy, but very, very intense. I
think that was like the most perfect story to answer my question. That story, I think says it all about it. I think a lot of these incredible jiu-jitsu practitioners and the Gracie family, they brought it here, but it's also their business and their life. And there are the killers and they do have a reputation, but they're also, can be soft and mushy and they know how to, build community and keep people like, I think you and me, businessmen, we're not fighters. Yeah. We're not, going out there trying to win a championship, involved and keep, pushing on this art. So now, okay, so I got the jiu-jitsu timeline down a little bit. Give me like the working timeline. When you land in California, do you go working for Twitter right away?
Yeah, I had another job actually when I moved to California in software, and kind of accidentally applied to Twitter. I was smoking weed one night or doing something on the computer and said, "You want to work at Twitter?" I was LinkedIn. I hit, yeah, I'll work at Twitter. And they called me 3 days later and said, "Hey, your resume didn't come through." And I said, "Oh, that's really weird." And I was kind of laughing in my head, like I didn't upload a resume, like literally clicked a button. And yeah, I interviewed there. I got hired there. I didn't have a big job at Twitter, to be honest. I was on our sales team. I managed some really big accounts there, like Comcast and Zillow and different folks like that. But Twitter was where I really got my confidence, right? That was the first time I had sort of a job at a big company of that reputation. And I was in there with kids from MIT and Harvard and Stanford and I was doing better than, the vast majority of my peers in my job, and starting to make friends in different departments. And people were like, wow, like you're really smart. You're really good at this. And I thought, holy shit, like I'm just this kid from Pennsylvania, pretty small town. I thought owning a Toyota Tacoma and having a house was sort of like the pinnacle of success in life. And now I'm here competing with the Stanford and MIT kids, and I'm actually doing really well. Like maybe there's bigger things for me in the world. And that's, I think, what gave me the confidence to start Guardian, and the confidence to, go other places, because, I was sitting there one day thinking at Twitter, and they'd asked me to kind of move up through the ranks there. And I just thought, like, I'm going to be here for 15 years before I become a, senior vice president of whatever. And I'm going to be 100 years old. My kids are going to be graduated. Like, I don't think this is a great career path, because I kind of started late. So I decided to leave Twitter after about 3.5 years. And then once I took time off, focused on Guardian for a while, got that nonprofit to where I wanted it to be, and I didn't have to outsource the culture and things like that. Then it allowed me to go back into the corporate world at a much higher level. And I became the chief revenue officer of one of the largest cannabis companies in the state. And it kind of allowed me to leapfrog, because I had that corporate experience, but I had the entrepreneurial experience then. And now I feel like my path is kind of well set up for whichever direction I want to go.
What gives you the chutzpah to be out there and go and say, I'm working at Twitter and I'm just going to go do something entrepreneurial and start this, nonprofit? I'm so interested in people who are able to do this. I mean, I'm sure you recognize that virtually most of the people in the world, somewhere 99% of the people in the world, are not entrepreneurial. They don't start businesses. They don't start nonprofits. So you got a great job at Twitter. You're making waves. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to do this thing. Why?
I think a lot of reasons. I mean, I think first of all, it's like, if you don't have a side hustle or some other thing in Silicon Valley, you're almost sort of like the outcast. You're the anomaly, if you will, right? Like a lot of people have some other project going on or some other aspiration here. It's very, I would say, like type A, aggressive area for that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. Without any disrespect to previous jiu-jitsu instructors or current jiu-jitsu instructors that I have, I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way when you go into a store, you start a business, you're dealing with a realtor, whatever it is. You're almost always thinking, if you're a smart person, you're like, this is how I would do it better. This doesn't make sense. Like this guy could do so much better if he structured his business this way or whatever. And so for jiu-jitsu, I never was very happy with jiu-jitsu instruction. I always found it extremely weird how you would go to a school or go to a class and a teacher would teach a different move that maybe related to yesterday's move. Maybe it was completely different. Maybe you showed up that day and the teacher was like, I don't feel like teaching, so just go kill each other on the mat type thing. And I kind of saw how a lot of the people who were the best at jiu-jitsu had sort of made their own path. They studied, they drilled on the side. They didn't just show up for class and sort of follow a curriculum and get better. A lot of them, they had to do it their own way. And I always thought, man, this is really strange that the way that jiu-jitsu is taught, because you had that old school Brazilian mentality, I think, of just this is how my teacher did it, so I'm going to keep doing it that way. And it's like, wait a second, there's only 1%, let's say, of people who start jiu-jitsu that make it to black belt. They end up being the teachers for the next group of people. So they think this worked for me. And I look at it and say, well, I want to know why it didn't work for the 99%. Because if we could change that 99% to 92%, that would be a massive, 8x win in the amount of people that stick with jiu-jitsu. And I really feel that a lot of that is because of the structure of the classes and how it happens. So that was, I think, kind of reason number one. Reason number two was living in the Bay Area, being an extremely expensive place to live, rent being really expensive for both commercial and residential real estate. I thought, this is really crazy. I was talking to a friend one day and he said, I can't put my 2 girls into jiu-jitsu because it's just too expensive. And I thought, well, you're like a pretty middle-class guy. Your wife works at the University of California, Berkeley. You have a decently successful construction business. And he said, well, I pay for soccer. I pay for swimming. I pay for my rent. I pay for this. And he's like, I just really can't afford the extra $300-400 a month. And I thought, wow, this is not even of course, people who have absolutely no money can't afford jiu-jitsu. But now lower middle class and even middle class people can't afford jiu-jitsu in the Bay Area. That's just unacceptable. This is a sport that should really not be that complicated. It's not like ice hockey where you have this really expensive ice time that you have to reserve and take care of, taking care of the ice and everything like that, which is obviously going to be expensive. So I thought maybe there's a way we can do it different, where we can do it better, where we can get more people, both kids and adults, access to this sport that's changed so many people's lives, like you and I.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yep, that is one of the things I could do it better, and it's needed. So, all right. So now tell us what exactly is Guardian? Where is it? What was it then, and what is it today?
Yeah. So I mean, Guardian really started with that simple mission, right? Let's get kids access to jiu-jitsu that can't afford it. I ended up partnering with a guy at Twitter who was the head of marketing there at the time, a guy named Joel Lunenfeld. He wanted to start a boxing nonprofit when I told him about the idea, or he was passionate about boxing. So we ended up making Guardian at the beginning, both boxing and jiu-jitsu, because that was his ask. And so we opened a space, and we decided that we wanted to, and it took us over a year to even find a space, in the Bay Area that made sense for what we were doing. But we decided we want to have an adult program and we want to have a kid program too. And the reason we want to have an adult program was for a few reasons. Number one, as you know, there's a lot of fixed cost with having a gym. Pretty much all the costs are really fixed other than the per instructor classes. So we thought it made sense to offset some of our costs, and we want to have some revenue generating model. So we weren't just constantly begging for donations, but we were working towards self-sustainability in the model. And the other reason is we wanted the kids to have mentors and a place to grow into. So when a kid was 16 and he was showing up there every day on the mat, we wanted him to have people that he could talk to about future careers, or maybe even get an internship from them, or things like that. And something that they could also grow into from a sport perspective. So if you're 15 years old, but you've been training in our program for 5 years, maybe it's time for you to go into adult classes. But if we didn't have the adult classes, now you're kind of stuck training with 10-year-olds. So that's not going to be a good progression for that student. So we started off with this dual model, kids and adults. We got up to about 550 students before the end of COVID, before the beginning of COVID. And then obviously the pandemic had a big effect on us. We had just expanded to a larger space, going from about 1,500 square feet to 8,600 square feet. So that was extra tough because we had tripled our rent, and we had hired all these different teachers. We had added a Thai boxing program and a strength and conditioning program. We really had this really amazing sort of world-class, almost on it academy style gym where you could come and do everything, as well as more space for the kids. So tutoring, after school lunch programs, things like that we really needed to add in because kids were showing up there not eating all day. So we wanted them to be able to study. We wanted them to get tutoring. We even had a paid psychologist on staff to help them with some of their problems that they could be having. So we expanded really big, bad timing right before COVID. And then it was really hard, honestly, to manage, because when you think about it, you have all these contracted instructors. So you've got a strength and conditioning coach who cares about the strength and conditioning program. The Muay Thai coach cares about the Muay Thai program. The boxing coach cares about the kids, but he's also got these 5 fighters he's training. And nobody agreed on a mask policy. Nobody agreed on, anything, how much there should be training, who should be in the gym, who shouldn't be, any of that stuff. So, we went through kind of a rocky period for the first time, I would say. We had this constant growth. Everything was great. A lot of love in the community, to all of a sudden kind of a bunch of people that started infighting. And, I didn't have full-time capabilities to manage. I lived 40 minutes away from the gym at the time, at that point. And I just thought, I don't want to manage a gym. I never started a nonprofit to manage a gym. I don't teach at the gym really. My whole thing was I wanted to create a nonprofit to allow for these kids to start training jiu-jitsu. And so we made a tough decision, and we said, is this really the model we want? Do we want to maintain these gyms? And what we've done is we've really shifted our model over the last 6 months or so to where we are starting to become, I'll call it the layer of nonprofit on top of all of these existing great gyms around the world. And people are coming to us. I probably get 3 to 4 phone calls or emails a week, people saying, hey, how do I start a Guardian in my city? How do I start a Guardian within my gym? Because these people have space already. They have the instruction, they have the mats, they have the insurance. They just need help starting the 501c3, tapping into their community, having an excuse to kind of bifurcate their programs from their paid students who can afford it to the kids who are actually in need. So now what we're doing is we're going into gyms We just started Peru a few months ago.
Oh, wow.
We just launched LA last month. And basically, we're carving out space in these gyms for our Guardian program where they can fundraise locally. We can help them with all the branding. We can be the 501c3 layer on top so somebody can maintain their gym and maintain their adult program and maintain everything else that they do, but now add a nonprofit component on top of it. And so that's where we're really focusing our energy right now and moving forward, because that's a lot more scalable for us. And we can focus on really helping kind of all these people who are passionate in their local communities to do what we want to do.
That's phenomenal. Is the gym, did you shut down the gym operation?
Yeah, we did shut down the gym our last gym operation in the East Bay. Mm-hmm. We're actually actively talking about to another group here who has a great gym and a great kids program about doing a Guardian program. So we'll still have a presence here in the East Bay. But yeah, just as of a few weeks ago, we finally shut it down. We got all the kids who are in the program into another school. So nobody was displaced from sort of that transition, which obviously would have been really tough. But yeah, we think this will be the most, we're very focused on, because we don't get money from the state. We're not a big grant organization. Almost all of our funding is private donations. A lot of jiu-jitsu people, for example, who understand the value of, making this sport accessible to more people. We're very conscious of not wasting money. Where can we get the most value per student? And if you have 12 kids training and it costs you $12,000 months to maintain a space, well, that's $1,000 per month per student. If I can have kids in Peru that are training for $27 a month and kids in LA that are training for $52 a month, it's a really tough decision when you take a step back and take sort of the emotion out of it to say, how can we not focus more of our time and attention from our content creation and from where our dollars go to those programs rather than maintaining this expensive overhead just to say that we have a fancy HQ.
Wow. Yep. It's good to really know what the mission is versus, getting lost in the weeds of running a gym when your goal was really to get as many kids doing jiu-jitsu as possible. So I really admire you for making those tough decisions. It reminds me of an early point in my career when we were growing Mixology, my clothing business. We had 6 stores before Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy I had a business partner, my dad, who's was the chairman of the business, and I'm very unemotional about it, said to the partner, if we want to keep this business going, you're going to have to shut down 3 of your stores. And he said, if I shut down 3 of my stores, people are going to think I'm going out of business. And my dad looked at him square in the eyes and said, if you don't shut down 3 stores, you're out of business. And so it's, sometimes these calculated moves, it's not about ego. It's just about figuring out, what am I doing here? Like, why am I doing this? Is it to have a lot of stores, or is it to have a business that's scalable? Of course, that was back in 2013, January 13. And that allowed us to make a much healthier, better, scalable business. The business that existed before Hurricane Sandy was not scalable. The business that we created on the heels of Hurricane Sandy is the business that's here today with 15 stores. And so you had to take that little moment to go backwards in order to go forwards and live out our mission. You have any favorite success stories? Tell me about some of your favorite kids who took this and they're doing things with their life.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of kids come through the program, and I think that, I'll say more of a general thought and then maybe ratchet it down to an individual success story. But one of the things that I think is important about a school is that you can kind of go back to it, right? And I think what you see with kids, and you see this with adults as well, but definitely with kids, they go in and out of things, right? It's hard to get a kid who trains from 10 to 20 and doesn't take a break, doesn't want to play other sports. I mean, these kids are meeting girls or they're meeting boys during this time. All of a sudden, you don't see a kid for 4 months. You're like, what happened to John? Oh, he got a girlfriend, right? He's 16. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember what that was like. And because jiu-jitsu is not, I think when you're in high school basketball, let's say I played, you're seeing your teacher every day who's also your coach, or at this school. It's pretty hard to skip practice or not take it seriously. But I think jiu-jitsu is actually very easy to just not go that day, right? Unless you have a real reason or a real push to go. And obviously a lot of the kids that we're targeting with our programs are not kids with high 2-parent involvement, right? These are a lot of kids who are literally doing nothing after school. That's almost always the answer we get, by the way. What would you be doing if you weren't here? We would be doing nothing. So It's never like, oh, I'd be playing this other sport. And so I think this is obviously a big problem in America as social programs and after school programs continue to get cut, is like, we need to stop spending so much money on incarcerating people for silly things and costing $100,000 a year, for example, in California. And we need to start putting more money and making the hard decisions to put money into kids earlier. Like, we should be throwing money at kids between 14 and 18, not throwing money at someone in the last 6 months of their life so they can live an extra 2 weeks. Like, that's just, I'm sorry to like be so blunt about it, but it's just a fact. Like, we can't keep paying for things later in life. We need to pay smaller amounts of money to help people earlier in life. So anyway, to get back to your question,
So I'll just say before you go, if you have an individual story to think of, investing is counterintuitive. It's very hard to think about investing in that way. Like I said, most people aren't entrepreneurs. It's not their natural inclination to understand that they have to go risk money. They always are taking care of a problem after. So if you took all the money that was put into our jails and our incarceration system and you thought, this is the problem, this is the total dollar amount, how much could we spend to save it? That is the exact way that I think about fixing problems within my business. So many times I have a problem in my business. It's costing me, let's just say, $1 million. I'll take a hard look at my budget. I have no room in the budget. But then I say to myself, if I invest in this problem, how much will I save? And so I've done that time and time and time and time again. I didn't have the budget, but let's just say it's going to cost me $100,000 to fix $1 million problem. I don't have to pay $100,000 on day one. I have to start paying it each week. And so sometimes that's putting the right human resource behind the problem. Sometimes that's investing in a piece of technology. Sometimes that's buying an extra vehicle or doing something that I can spread the cost out over. And so people think about problems in that way. Oh, it's going to cost me $100,000 to fix this $1 million problem. I don't have $100,000. Mm-hmm. Well, you have to you reframe these situations on investing, and they don't teach people how to think this way. This is not something that gets taught. Although it does exist every single day in jiu-jitsu, because it's the same philosophy of saying, I want to get a black belt. Oh yeah? Well, guess what? That might take you 10 years. What do I have to do? Show up every single day. The more time you take off, the more. So Business Jiu-Jitsu, this project, it was formed in a similar way to your instinct. I had all these young guys, all these teammates of mine, all these people, even older people sometimes, a lot of retired cops. They've been on the force for 20, 30 years. They're only in their early 50s. Now, I got this business idea. And they would come to me and start asking me questions. We'd be sitting around for hours after practice and after training, and they'd be grilling me. I want to start a t-shirt business. I want to do a flip. I want to start this. And I would just start telling them all these stories. And that's the way that Business Jiu-Jitsu came, just like helping people. And I was like, I'm going to write a book about all these stories.
Well, think about it too. Like, you're on the mat, and you're on the mat with all these 18 to 30-year-olds, right? You're a little bit older. They know you're successful. You have a company. You've got a podcast. You've got some pieces of real estate, whatever. It's like they're all aggressive, mostly males, right, that are trying to figure out like their lot in life. And I totally get it. But it's such a great value for people like that to be able to sit there and ask questions afterwards, right? It's such a great thing for a 15-year-old kid to be able to, talk to someone who's 10 years older. Like, what happened with, this is what I'm thinking about doing in college. This is, oh, well, that's great. But let me tell you what I would do different if I could go back. And it's that time that you get there, that, I don't know what you would call it, that golden period after a class where you're sitting there and you're stretching and you just had 7 hard rounds of rolling. To me, that is like the absolute best time in the world, where your brain is just totally clear of any bad thoughts. You're really present. You're talking to people. Like, there's really great friendships and conversations that form there after that time.
I've actually never once thought about that in my entire life, but I'm going to assign a word to it. Like, you're kind of high, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of having it's like having a runner's high. If you don't want to call it a smoking high or whatever, you're kind of high after you've exercised like that and exerted energy and had this kind of experience, and you're sitting there like you are having a almost outer body, and you're thinking in an incredibly clear way. And then to have those kind of conversations, you're right. It is very, very powerful. And to have an organization like yours that puts kids in that and connects them with mentors and people, it's just a great mission. And I'm glad that we uncovered this in this conversation.
How do you stay friends with people, right? This is like a big thing that I think about a lot. So what is a friendship? Is it are we friends because we're connected on Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that? Like, not really. Are we friends because your phone number's in my phone? I don't know. I got a lot of people's phone number in my phone that I wouldn't say I'm friends with. So what is a friendship, right? And I think the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is it forces you to have these multiple times a week in real life experiences with people. And it's very easy to build and maintain friendships that way. Whereas, like, I'm sure you feel the same way as me, like some of your friends from high school or college or your early 20s or whatever. If you don't have that thing, like, what are you going to do? Get on a Zoom call with them every month and just check in? And, it's really hard. So jiu-jitsu is like this forced platform with people who are almost 100% across the board interested in some level of positivity and healthy living and good habits. Like, it's an amazing, I would argue that it's like a better than golf networking type thing, the way that it happens, right? And the people who don't take advantage of that, when I go to a class and I go, what's that guy do over there? Who is that guy? What's he do? And somebody's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, you've been training with him for 4 years. You don't know what he does and what his name is and where he works. Like, that's fucking crazy. Like, you should know everything about that guy. And I don't get that, right? It's like, to me, it's great networking.
This is a topic that comes up on this podcast a lot with business professionals. It's because it's not taught. This is one of my number one things that I do when I coach and mentor people is I have to make them aware that they are networking when they don't even know. And that is one of the bad things about jiu-jitsu. It's like, oh yeah, that guy, that's pickup truck guy. You know him. He comes on Tuesdays sometimes. Like, they don't know each other's names. They don't know what each other do. And I was like, that guy's John. Okay. He's been here for 6 years. He's a plumber. You should call him if you have a problem. And he's a realtor and he's a teacher. And, I basically know everybody's name and I shake their hand. And whenever I see new people, I walk up to them, I shake them, I look them in the eye, I get to know them. And that's such an underrated thing. And being able to teach young people that who don't come from it, I grew up around it. I'm very, very lucky. I had incredible parents, grandparents. I grew up with these things. It was not an option not to shake an adult's hand and look at them in the eye. I would have been scolded, as a child. And so sometimes I meet these kids in jiu-jitsu, their parents bring them in and they look down and they give you the limp hand. And I say, welcome, come on the mat. And they gain so much confidence from jiu-jitsu. And then, the learning, the networking thing is just, is really, really powerful.
Let me answer your question really quick though, because I think you'll like this story about. Give me an example of something that happened at the gym that's interesting. This only happened 5 weeks ago, roughly, so it's kind of top of mind. And as I said before, the interesting thing about jiu-jitsu, I think, is for kids especially, is that they can come back and forth and have this safe haven. They might not be there for 3 months, but something changes in their life and they decide they want to come back, right? And so we had one of these kids like that. He trained with us pretty consistently, but now he's 15, 16 years old. He's got friends, he's got other interests, he's starting to like girls, all these things. So he hasn't been as consistent. The guy who runs our program now is a guy named Calder Powers. He's an amazing guy. He's like a 27-year-old guy. His life was changed from jiu-jitsu. He literally looks like Superman. He's just everything like I want my son to be is like this guy, super positive.
Wow.
And he cares so much about the kids, right? So he's calling when kids don't show up. He's not just like, oh, it's fine, whatever, they'll come back. He's calling them. He's calling their parents. He's DMing them on Instagram. He's meeting them where they want to be met, right? To like try to get them back in the gym. And he's just young enough, I think, still that like he's cool enough to them that like they don't see him as this really old guy like they see me. And this one kid in particular, he really liked. He's following up with him, and finally he reaches out to the mom and goes, "Hey, like it'd be great to get this kid back into the program." Single mom, and she's like, "Yeah, like I want to get him back in the program for sure." So he calls him the next day, and he says, or he goes to the mom. He says, "Hey, can I go out with my friends tomorrow or today? I need to go do this thing." And the mom said, "No, I talked to Calder yesterday. You're going to jiu-jitsu today." After class, so he comes to jiu-jitsu, does class, goes to his phone after class, of course, and he looks at his phone and he said, the 3 kids that I was supposed to be with today were all shot, and 2 of them died, and I would have been in the group of 4 on the corner with them, and I would have definitely been shot, and I may have been killed. So jiu-jitsu, literally going to that class that day, saved his life, because places like Oakland are literally a war zone. I mean, it is like it is absolutely crazy what goes on even in broad daylight today. I mean, people like you and me that have sort of very privileged, I guess you would say, situations now with, where we get to live and the people we surround ourselves with and the space between our houses. Like, these kids don't have that. Like, they are in war zones in a lot of these cities like San Francisco and Oakland. And just literally coming to class that day, I have no idea how he did it. Class, I wasn't there, but by being at the gym and having a place to go, he did not die or get shot that day.
Wow. You just get chills just thinking about that story. I'm glad we took time to really build to that and synthesize and, bring that one up, because I think that's an important story to share. And I hope we can get it into as many kids' hands as possible and people's hands as possible, because that is so true. We are so privileged. Anybody who doesn't have to live in those circumstances anywhere in the world and has something to do like jujitsu to keep them out of trouble, it's a really powerful thing. Let me share your site over here. I have it pulled up.
And I don't know how many, while you're pulling this up, I don't know how many jiu-jitsu owners of studios listen to this, right? Versus kind of practitioners like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
But my sort of ask to people would be, unless you're Art of Jiu-Jitsu or Marcelo Garcia and you literally have no space left on the mat because you've got 500 kids in your kids program, to me, it's like, if you have space, why not consider something like what we're doing, right? Why not figure out a creative way that we can get more of these kids in there? And that's really what we've tried to create at Guardian, is this win-win for schools. Because I used to go to schools and say, hey, we've got a Guardian program. Look how many kids we are. It's awesome. Why don't you let kids train for free at your program? And a lot would say yes, but there was always this underlying of like, what's in it for me, right? Or like, hey, like, I'm busy trying to keep my head above water and run a gym. And now with this sort of fiscal sponsorship program that we run, it allows schools to add this level or this layer into their school. And, if the fundraising goes well, it can actually be something that actually helps the bottom line for the school owner and gets the kids training for free, right? So I think, like all business that's good and that's long lasting, creating that win-win is super important.
Phenomenal. Well, I've got the donation page pulled up right here, and as soon as we finish this, I'll pop in this $250 donation for you and your organization. And just wanted to say that it was great getting to know you. If I could be of service to you and help promote Guardian, just let me know. Keep me updated on your events. And we didn't get to talk about it, but a friend of the podcast and mine, Mike Constantiner, put us together. And big shout out to Mike, and thank you for putting Ben on my radar.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for Mike for the introduction. It's great to meet you. It's awesome to see people that are using jiu-jitsu positively in their lives for being a better father and, being a better businessman and all the things that you're doing. So congrats on that.
Right back at you. Please support Ben's organization. And if I could be of any service to you out there, please let me know. Have a great day, Ben.
Thank you, Jordan.
See ya.